Your eye is not just some passive lens. It's actually one of the most metabolically demanding tissues in your entire body. The retina, that paper-thin layer at the back of the eye that converts light into the signals your brain reads as vision, is burning energy at a frankly extraordinary rate. It literally never stops working. And here's the catch. All that intense metabolic activity generates this constant stream of oxidative stress. You can think of it like exhaust coming out of a heavy-duty engine. The harder that engine works, the more exhaust it pumps out. And if those free radicals aren't neutralized, they start systematically damaging the very cellular structures they came from.
So this is exactly where that biological exhaust starts showing up in your day-to-day life. If you've been noticing a lot more sensitivity to the glare of oncoming headlights at night, or if you're squinting because the words on a menu are suddenly kind of blurry in a way they weren't 6 months ago, well, you've probably just assumed it's normal aging. But actually, it's not. What you're experiencing is the direct result of that oxidative exhaust completely outstripping your body's natural defenses. Because once we cross the age of 60, our internal antioxidant systems, the ones we were born with, they just don't work as efficiently as they did when we were 35.
Part 1. The eye's energy crisis.
Right, so because your natural biological defenses are fading, the gap between the oxidative stress your eyes are generating and your body's ability to clear it out gets a little wider every single decade. And that widening gap, that's exactly where the damage sets in. Things like cataracts, early macular degeneration, declining night vision, these aren't just random, disconnected events. They're the slow, cumulative result of oxidative stress attacking vulnerable eye tissue that simply doesn't have the chemical shield it used to. To really grasp how we defend against this, we need to talk about the macula. It's this tiny, highly specialized region right at the center of your retina, maybe the size of a pencil eraser. It is entirely responsible for your razor-sharp central vision, reading, recognizing your grandkids' faces, looking at your phone. That's all the macula. Now, this area relies on something called macular pigment optical density, or MPOD. These pigments are mostly made of two highly specific compounds, lutein and zeaxanthin. And they function quite literally, like a pair of internal sunglasses. They sit there and absorb high-energy blue light before it has the chance to reach and destroy your ultra-sensitive photoreceptor cells. And the data is incredibly clear here. People with higher macular pigment density have a significantly lower risk of developing age-related macular degeneration, which is, unfortunately, the leading cause of irreversible vision loss in adults over 50.
But here is the stark biological reality we're all facing. Your body cannot manufacture a single molecule of lutein or zeaxanthin on its own. Not one. Every single bit of that chemical shield, those internal sunglasses protecting your macula, had to come directly from the food you've eaten throughout your life. So as the years tick by, if you aren't actively and intentionally replenishing those specific pigments through your diet, that vital protective layer physically thins out. It just wears down, leaving those high-energy photoreceptors completely exposed to the elements.
Which brings us to a massive, quiet deficit. Eye health researchers generally agree that 6 milligrams of lutein a day is the meaningful, protective target you need to actually maintain that retinal shield. But the average American, we're only getting about 1 to 2 milligrams a day. That is a huge gap. And most of us have absolutely no idea this invisible deficit even exists right up until the day an ophthalmologist tells us our lenses are clouding over or our macular pigment is dangerously low.
Part 2. The kiwi fruit advantage.
So when you actually dig into the clinical studies that measure macular pigment optical density as a concrete, physical outcome, one very specific fruit keeps popping up in the literature to fill that exact deficit: the kiwi. There's a landmark trial from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition that tracked adults over a 12-week period. The folks who ate 3 kiwis a day showed a highly meaningful, measurable increase in their macular pigment density. We're not talking about some vague theoretical benefit here. This was a physical thickening of the actual shield protecting the center of their retinas. And what makes kiwi so fascinating is that it doesn't just do one thing. It actually mounts a highly specific 3-tiered defense for your eyes. First, it delivers highly bioavailable lutein straight to the macula to rebuild that pigment layer. Second, ounce for ounce, kiwi is incredibly dense in vitamin C, even more than a similar-sized orange. The lens of your eye actually holds one of the highest concentrations of vitamin C in the entire human body, and it uses it specifically to defend its proteins against the oxidative damage that triggers cataracts. Third, kiwi brings fat-soluble vitamin E to the table, which protects the fatty cell membranes of your actual photoreceptors, the rods and cones that convert light into signals. So you have 3 totally different parts of the eye, all being defended simultaneously by this one little fruit.
Let's ground this science for a second with a real-world case from our source material. There's a 68-year-old patient named Arthur. He was noticing that he was constantly squinting at the dinner table, and his ophthalmologist confirmed his macular pigment was definitely on the low side. So Arthur decided to start a simple preventative routine: 2 kiwis every single day, paired with some healthy fats to help with absorption. 8 months later, his retinal measurements had completely stabilized, actually holding much better than expected for a guy his age. His takeaway was pretty straightforward: I think the kiwis are working. And honestly, that reflects exactly what the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition trial proved. The biological mechanism is incredibly sound, and these tools do work if you apply them consistently.
Part 3. The absorption multiplier effect.
But here is a hard truth. What you eat is actually completely irrelevant if your body can't utilize it. We have to shift our focus from just what you're eating to how well you're absorbing it. Because as we age, our digestive efficiency naturally just starts to slow down. Our stomach acid drops, our digestive enzyme production tanks, and the vital nutrients that are supposed to be feeding your retinal cells often just pass right through, completely unabsorbed. But this is where kiwi has another massive advantage. It contains a totally unique biological enzyme called actinidin. Research shows that actinidin significantly enhances the breakdown and absorption of proteins from whatever meal you eat alongside the kiwi. And remember, the physical architecture of those delicate photoreceptor cells in your eye. Those structural proteins require very precise nutritional building blocks to maintain and repair themselves. Actinidin essentially bridges that gap of declining digestive efficiency, making sure that more of the raw materials you eat actually make it into your bloodstream to repair the retina.
And speaking of absorption, we have to talk about a massive multiplier for lutein, the factor of 4. Lutein is fat-soluble. So if you're just eating a bowl of plain leafy greens or some kiwis without any dietary fat whatsoever, you're actually absorbing very little of that crucial protective pigment. But researchers at Ohio State University discovered something amazing. If you pair fat-soluble lutein with a high-quality fat carrier, like, say, half an avocado, it increases the absorption of that lutein by a factor of 4 to 5 times. That right there is literally the difference between getting meaningful structural protection into your macula and getting absolutely nothing at all.
Part 4. The vascular supporting cast.
Kiwi is a phenomenal anchor, but visual longevity requires an entire biological network to function properly. Specifically, we have to defend the microvasculature. These are the microscopic, delicate blood vessels that constantly feed your retina the oxygen and nutrients it desperately needs to survive, that massive metabolic energy burn we talked about earlier. So let's look at the complete retinal support ensemble. First up, blueberries. They are absolutely packed with anthocyanins. These are powerful antioxidants that have a very specific affinity for tiny blood vessels. They support the structural integrity of those vessel walls and enhance the microvascular circulation right to the retina. Then we have avocado, which, as we just saw, acts as the ultimate absorption multiplier and fat carrier for your lutein. Finally, whole oranges, and I mean whole, not juice, because that white pith just beneath the peel contains vital bioflavonoids. When those bioflavonoids work in partnership with the orange's vitamin C, they provide incredible support for those small blood vessels and actively defend the lens against nuclear cataracts.
Part 5. The silent retinal saboteur.
Now, there is one massive caveat to all of this. There is a critical, systemic threat that can completely undermine this entire nutritional defense system. It affects an estimated 34 million Americans, and many of them have absolutely no clue it's actively destroying their eyesight from the inside out. We're talking about glucose toxicity. The tiny blood vessels feeding your retina are almost always the very first casualties of elevated blood sugar. And here's the scary part. You do not need to be a fully diagnosed diabetic for this damage to start. Even pre-diabetic blood sugar spikes cause cumulative microscopic damage to those fragile retinal vessels. Every time your blood sugar stays elevated, it deposits structural damage that adds up over the years. You could eat all the kiwi and blueberries on Earth, but if your blood sugar is chronically elevated, you are actively burning down the exact microvascular highway those nutrients need to travel on. Managing your blood sugar isn't some separate issue from eye health. It is the absolute foundation of it.
And that brings us to a very strict, very important medical boundary for this explainer. The nutritional protocols we're digging into today are incredibly powerful tools for prevention. They will fiercely protect the macular pigment you still have. They will support lens clarity in eyes that haven't already crossed into severe cataract territory. But we need to be crystal clear. They are not a miracle reversal. If you are dealing with advanced macular degeneration or if your cataracts have progressed to the point of needing surgery, kiwi is not going to magically reverse that damage. The window for these biological tools to actually make a profound difference is right now, while the machinery is still functioning and while you still have pigment left to protect.
Part 6. A realistic visual strategy.
Look,
Information without application is entirely useless, so let's establish a practical, grounded rhythm for actually integrating these targeted foods into your daily life so you can defend your eyes against that lifelong oxidative stress. Here is the quiet, absolutely non-negotiable weekly dietary rhythm that the research supports. Step 1 is your anchor. 2 kiwis daily, ideally in the morning. This supplies that highly bioavailable lutein and that crucial actinidin enzyme. Step 2 is vessel support. A handful of blueberries with breakfast, maybe 3 to 4 times a week, just to protect that microvascular circulation. Step 3 is your absorption multiplier. Half an avocado at lunch, again 3 to 4 times a week, to multiply your lutein absorption by 4 to 5 times. And step 4 is lens defense. 1 whole orange as an afternoon snack, making sure you eat that white pith for the bioflavonoids. It is really not a complicated regimen, but it is a highly consistent, strategic defense system for your retinas.
Ultimately, your long-term vision isn't just some accident of luck. It's the long, slow result of the choices you make about how you feed and defend your own biology. Your macula is your shield, but it relies entirely on you to supply the armor. So ask yourself, are your daily choices actually giving your eyes the precise tools they need to endure so they don't just fade to blur? As you think on that, just know our investigation does not stop here. In an upcoming explainer, we're going to be breaking down the clinical data behind a specific, much lesser-known combination of nutrients that research suggests can actively slow the progression of early macular degeneration once it has already begun. You absolutely won't want to miss it.